I think we are about to start. What a packed audience. How wonderful. Welcome so much to our 14th annual Hamptons Doc Fest. I'm Jackie LaFaro, the director, founder and director, and I'm so happy that you're here. We're so pleased. Thank you. Thank you. So tonight is really very special. You're going to see a film that is pretty extraordinary. Leonard Bernstein's imprint on the world of music has been a gift to all of us. We've metabolized his scores, we've experienced his the tormenting parts of his life, and responded to his political activism many times over. But this documentary by Doug Firola reveals another dimension of the famed composer, and we will leave the theater today with a renewed wow for Lenny. Doug Firola is an award-winning director whose work premiered at Sundance, Berlinale, Tribeca, South by Southwest. His films include Bloodroot, Drunk, Stoned, Brilliant, Dead, The Story of National Lampoon, among others. He has also produced the critically acclaimed Brisby 17 and Making the Boys. His producing partner is Susan Bedusa, who you'll meet, and she's the Senior VP of Production and Development at Fourth Row Films. She produces feature docs and non-scripted television. We were so impressed with Doug's documentary and its contribution to us and to the world of nonfiction film that it's being awarded our 2021 Art and Inspiration Award, sponsored by the T. and Charles Adams Foundation. So at this point, I'd like to invite the foundation director, Kevin Mizuraki, up to present the 2021 Award and Inspiration Award to Doug. Kevin?
Thank you. Bye. That's beautiful. It's backwards, too. Anyway, thank you very much for having me here. This is the third year that the foundation has supported this Inspiration Award. And especially this year, I don't know if you knew about Leonard Bernstein, but I did not. I knew him as the man who was the most extravagant conductor I'd ever seen. I was a teenager. I went to the young people's concerts at both Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center. And we were spoiled, horribly spoiled. I couldn't believe we were actually seeing a real live conductor. And then I had the opportunity to watch this film before seeing it tonight. And I couldn't believe that this was the same man. Of all that he had done and what type of person he was and what drove him is just extraordinary. So if you already know all this, good for you, but I didn't. You're going to really enjoy this. This is an education beyond belief. And it's also, it's all him. It's not other people's opinions. He's narrating. He's live. It's amazing.
Doug, come over.
Oh, I wondered where he was. I knew it wasn't him. Oh, I have to give you this? Oh, congratulations! It's my pleasure to be the one to present it to you.
Thank you. I'm I can't believe this is a real award, and and thank you, Kevin, and to the foundation, and Jackie and Karen and everybody who invited the film to come here. I'm usually not nervous at these, but like the audience here, from what I know of this festival, is certainly on the higher, more sophisticated intellectual level. So I hope the film holds up to the award. In terms of the Inspiration Award, as you said, the challenge of making the film, but what is fulfilling is most of the other documentaries I've made, even if they take place in the past, where there's some archive, we're interviewing people. And this, we decided to let him speak for himself, which was a great idea. But getting into it, then it was. I think it's kind of like a relationship. You're like, we're in love, and then you're like, are we going to make it? Because it was, because you know, there is no definitive audio book or anything like that. But I always thought of the film Not that we pitched it this way, but as, Bernstein had just played some fantastic, hall in Europe and maybe went to get a bite to eat and saw someone, sitting at the other end of the bar or there or in the restaurant and decided to tell that person his life story, but really as a way to teach that person about life and the meaning of life and what the role of art is. And the film is very much about asking the question, and Bernstein trying to answer, what is the role of the artist and what is the role of art? And not to be too corny, but that's really what it's all about, which is a line he actually says in the movie about something else. I just realized as I say that, this is what it's really all about. So the inspiration is really him. He inspired me. I'll say, I know we're going to have a Q&A afterwards, but my mom is the person that exposed me to Bernstein. She worked for a very wealthy woman who had a subscription. The woman got divorced and moved to Arizona and gave my mom that subscription. So that was which is kind of what you hope. My mom was one of those sneak in at intermission, in Broadway show from Upper Manhattan people. But I luckily lived in a home with books and music. And in terms of the inspiration that as the filmmaker, and Sue, we're the filmmakers of this, is really to try and call for people to try and use their work to create social change. The movie is his story told through his fight for social change. It's you could make a 30-hour movie about him and still have room for a sequel. So this is our version of him as he tries to find his way through his work and his life and what art is and how art can or can't change the world. Obviously, I'm hopeful that it can. I like movies and I like sports, so I always think my team's going to win and the people are going to end up together at the end of the movie. But you'll have to see if it inspires you. I hope it does. And thank you so much for this award. I really appreciate it. No. I'll drop it.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the director, Doug Firola, and the producer, Susan Bedusa.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just an outstanding, very, very complicated project to put together about a very complicated and fascinating man. Just a beautiful, beautiful job, I have to say. A magnificent film. A lot to talk about here, but before we get to the film itself, I'd like to talk a little bit about you guys' background. Apparently you've been working together for a long time, producing partners, and sometimes you produce together and sometimes you direct and she produces. Tell me a little bit about how that works. That's been going on for a while. How do you guys do that?
It works. That's,
What was your first project? How did you start out?
Our first documentary project was a film. It was called an Omar Broadway film. We did not know anything about making documentaries, and we came across this story. It sort of came to us through a project we were doing for a client, and this was before we knew anybody in the industry of documentary. It happened to get into Tribeca Film Festival without, us having any contacts there, and it was bought by HBO at the first screening. And we're like, let's keep doing this, because we had both come from scripted films, and that was our first doc. So
it was about a gentleman who was a member of the Bloods gang who was in he's in the prison between the airport in Newark and the city, and he sneaks in a video camera. It's before smartphones, to try and expose what's happening there, but really to try and blackmail his way out. And when it got in, when this audience would probably know, Sheila Nevins,
right.
When she's like, "So who did you know at Tribeca?" and we said nobody, and she goes, "That's so cute. That still happens."
Well, it would be cute if it could still happen today. So let's talk about this one. I had said to Susan ahead of time that I thought maybe, thinking about where this film came from, the idea for this film came from, I thought it might have come from the context you made and the world you were living in when you did The Making of the Boys. But in fact, because of the community involved in that and Leonard's other life, I thought that it might have come from there. But instead, it came from a place that you tell us.
Well, we were researching. We wanted to do a film or a limited series about New York in the '80s, and the entry to it was going to be told through the structure of E.B. White's essay or article from the late '40s called "Here Is New York," which they now print as a book. And it's really, it kind of connects to Bernstein, though we didn't realize it right away, because it's really about post-war New York and people coming with their dreams, and that New York is an idea, that anything can happen. And in researching that, we saw this compilation video, great moments of the 80s sort of thing. And there was the concert you see at the end, which I remembered being broadcast, growing up. And it just went on a journey, like I think a lot of filmmakers or just anybody who gets interested in something, of looking at other things of Bernstein. But instead of being drawn to the musical part of it, which is everywhere, it was really his talking about his philosophy, about Judaism, about his family, all these things. Or you'd watch a 90-minute lecture about Beethoven, which sort of bookends the movie. But there's like 2 minutes here and 90 seconds there where he's saying things, where he's relating making music to life. Like one of the first things I wrote down was which you see at the end, when he talks about what Beethoven means. But then he says it's not just his symphonies, it's the concertos and the quartets. And to us, that meant it's not just the big moments. It's not just when you're at Lincoln Center. It's just every moment of life.
Right.
And you could see how he could do this. And then I usually have a notebook with me, and I write down, and then I can't read my own handwriting, but I write down stuff. And then I got to a number of these quotes, and I went to Sue and said, I want to make a movie about Leonard Bernstein because I want to express these thoughts. A lot of what he's saying relates to today, and a lot of these are ideas you don't really hear about in film. I like the way he talks about work. The idea of the conducting was very personal to me. When he says, "Oh, you must love it when you point your finger and people do what you want," and he said, "No, it's the breathing together." I started in the scripted world, and I worked for a lot of great directors, and some were definitely the baton pointers who were telling various, very talented people, department heads, I know you have a lot of ideas, leave them at home on the director. And I really strive to be, even when it's frustrating, sometimes for the editors, producer, we need to talk about this. I want it to be, at 1 a.m, sometimes someone just wants to be told what to do. And I'm like, no, I need to make sure you're with me. Yeah. And so it was a way to express a lot of personal things for me through his story, which I think hopefully everybody relates to his story in some way.
Well, I think so. I think that the discussions, as was said ahead of time, and the Art and Inspiration Award goes to this, which is the function of the artist in general, and making art, whether it's making music or whether it's conducting, composing, or making films, whatever. It is all the little pieces. It's putting the pieces together, and it's community. It's building community. It's the human experience, as Bernstein talks about. This is how do we get this commonality of the human experience across all borders. And Kennedy talked about it too. It's the same thing. It's the human condition. So let's get to this, because you mentioned that this 90-minute lecture about Beethoven, and you used it brilliantly, I think, to bookend the thing. It starts out with these dates, and that's the beginning of what fascinated me about the film. Is he's talking about dates, and you're picking the footage that goes to this, and that goes throughout the entire film, is not only cutting together things from that lecture and then other lectures and other moments with what's the footage you're going to run to illustrate that. So how did you pick all that stuff?
Well, we chose it, but in some ways it was like going to tag sales in the Midwest. We were in search of things to tell the story.
Exactly.
And when you knew that it was going to be this idea of the cinematic language was going to look so different, because his life starts with radio, and not everybody even has radio then. And then we go to black and white TV, and by the end of his life, you're starting the emergence of home video. So that could be a chaotic look for a film. Having him be the sole voice is what gives it the continuity that helps it be that way. So, you're looking for. I'll give, not to get too deep into it, but when Felicia dies is a great example. We had access to some home movies of her, or of the family. And at first, the editor has something where they put on these plays, you kind of get an idea, and one of them, she's sick. So, of course, the editor put something in. The editor did a great job. This is his first movie that's not a co-editor job. He did one sports film as a co-editor, and this. And then I'm like, let's have her when she's happy, when she's looking to the camera, almost like those Warhol 90-second things where he puts you in front of the camera. And so you're experimenting to try and find images that work. And same thing with Kennedy. There's a shot of Kennedy and the famous shot of Kennedy and Jackie O in the car before he's assassinated. And we were going to use the footage you see. Instead, we found footage from the other side of the car where they're smiling, and it just works better. So you're experimenting as you go along. And then there's some things you just, you want to, Louis Armstrong, we found that. To see him hug, to see the two men of different races hug in that era, I knew that that was in the film immediately. It said so much. Finding Harry Belafonte explaining that he went to Bernstein, which says so much more in a way than Bernstein just, being there. So you just look for things. The REM clip. We went through a lot of REM clips to find one that worked. If anyone knows that the End of the World song where he says, just felt you had to have that in there to show how big huge he was.
But it was great to have it live with everybody in the audience screaming Leonard Bernstein.
That was the idea, that they all knew. Look at all those people that probably never heard. They were too young for young people's concert, but they know him through that song.
Yeah, well, I wanted to mention about young people's concerts and another thing, but I mean, to have his voice was remarkable itself, not only because you had his voice, but because that voice, to me, is the most distinctive voice possibly known to man. I mean, I certainly grew up with it. I am old enough to have gone to the young people's concerts. My parents introduced me to classical music, but that was my first listening. I was listening to classical music on the way over and thinking, Leonard Bernstein was responsible for my first exposure to classical music. But his voice, hearing him do Peter and the Wolf, I could hear his voice anywhere, and it's Leonard Bernstein.
What was important about his voice to us is that he, just like the clip from the Beethoven lecture, he's in some sort of crisis. He's reflecting on his life, and all the people that are Jesus and Beethoven, they're all mourning our existence now. But he doesn't sound like an older person. It's not Bridges of Madison County or something. I mean, he's nothing against that good movie, but meaning it's not that sort of thing. It's his cadence. He sounds now, and it sounds urgent, and he's so passionate about everything. So his voice brings this reflection into a present tense when you listen to it, and
it brings his personality because it is so distinctively him. So let's talk a little bit about some of the nuts and bolts of this. The score. Okay, there's original music, and there's piecing together the other music, which is all the pieces we saw at the end. Now, this is even beyond, especially because it's Leonard Bernstein, this is even beyond piecing together the images to go with his voice. Now we have the music to go with the images and the voice. So how does that work?
Even in a film that's not about music, when it's a subject where there's such a passionate fan base, and you realize people in the audience someone's gonna know more than we do, for sure. So I like to think of it as like a box set. Do you remember the first, like the Chuck Berry box set and the Marvin Gaye one? And it's like the hits. So if I go to a movie and I want to hear, if West Side Story's not in there, that's a mistake. I mean, it's a choice, and then some things like the rarities, things that maybe just some people really that know his extensive work, and then some things hopefully nobody's heard. So the music was very much that way. And also there's just, not everybody likes classical music, but in movies, especially scripted movies, people seem to love like Breaking Away. Everybody loves that music in Breaking Away. Ordinary People, you can go through these things where if they might hear it somewhere else, it'd be like, can you turn the radio to another station? So we were really looking for music that would appeal in the movie, the conducting scene. They were just, because it is a movie. You want, and his story is cinematic, so you want people. You don't want it to just be information. You want to take the ride with him, and so the curation of the music, I think, was a big part of it. And we had promised the Bernsteins we would use some things that were lesser known, and we asked them, what are things that you wish was out there more? And then the other part of it is we did bring on a composer, Peter Golod. He's great. He's the head of the Sundance music program. He was a fan of Bernstein, but we didn't want Bernstein sound-alikes. So his music is really that manipulative tone that does the story, that helps us where we need a little help with the story, like a lot of the political things. And then the last letter is his piece. He said that when he called me, it was because he's in LA, so it was like 3 a.m. for us, but we were up working, and he's like, I feel like Bernstein's in the room with me right now, trying to compose us. And so it was a gift to get him.
No, it's stitched together beautifully. We don't have a ton of time left, but I want to ask you one question. If you were going to say that as you piece this together, you wanted to capture one specific or one thematic, one quality about Bernstein, was there one thing you were after as you picked stuff together, as you sort of pieced this together? Was the one thing, and one thing that occurred to me was the consistency of the man. You got together him conducting young, him conducting old, him conducting in between, and it was all cut together, and it showed such consistency.
Well, I think part of it is in the beginning when he does the piece, which we call the Santa Claus song, and there is no footage, obviously, of him from when he was a teenager, essentially, performing, auditioning to get in there. And we found this other footage from a concert that was done late where he's clearly older. And at one thought, it was like, was this going to jump the timeline too much? I had confidence in the audience that wouldn't be the way, but it became a theme where you see there things that he's doing, like the West Side Story, that just keep coming back in his life. And because life is like that, you keep going back. The same skills you use to solve problems at 18, you're probably doing that, every decade of your life. So even though it's not in the film, the Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue was something he went back to all the time. That, the same thing. We see him playing it older. I think that was around the bicentennial, 1976. But he's telling a story, from earlier on.
Oh, that's great stuff. Okay, so two questions.
When I'm doing interviews, I always say one more question for about an hour. So
yeah, I know.
Okay.
Well, as you said in the beginning, you could make a film of 30 hours and still have room for a sequel on this man. So the fact that you tightened it up to this and got as much as you did. But the first question is the last shot. So we have him. It seems that the music has ended. He's there very still. So one wonders, first of all, what happened in the hall at that time with the audience? What were they waiting for? What was he waiting for? And then what was your thinking behind having that be the final shot?
Well, there was a lot of back and forth of whether we would end with music or not. One thought immediately was I didn't want to end with music to the extent that it's sort of like applause, like an applause line. But it is, arguably, one of the greatest pieces of I would explain to my kids it's the Stairway of Heaven for adults, but so you're at the movie, you want to hear that ending, right? Because the movie could have ended when he's like, I'm sorry about the dates, which when the family watched it, that was their favorite part. They're like, that's exactly him. He just kept going, and he says so much there, but you want the fulfillment of that. The ending is the idea of where we zoom in on him and it holds for that amount of time. Is for the first part of it, you're supposed to be thinking, I hope someone thinks this, but this is what we're hoping, is that you're thinking, like, did he get to this apex of using his art to create social change with this symbolism of the American Jewish director or conductor doing performing Beethoven's Ninth on Christmas morning in essentially former Nazi Germany? And did he get to that? The holding it so long came from something from when I got married, which is the person who performed the ceremony said to us, when you're walking out the center aisle, everyone's going to be crying. Let me assure you, they are not crying because you're getting married. She said there's something about certain moments in life that unlocks people thinking about, reflecting on their own life. I didn't say this to him, but I immediately said, like a good movie. Like there's some movies that do that, right? And so the idea was to hold that, so you're supposed to be thinking, like, what is he thinking? And then hopefully it comes back to you, because we're all going to have these moments of reflection. It's about 17 seconds. I know this because it was 12, and I said to the editor, it's got to be longer. But one frame more, and he starts to turn. I know people say Germans aren't that emotional. They weren't not applauding for 17 minutes or 17 seconds. It was, we loop the sound. They start applauding about after 3 seconds. And it's just to have this moment for the audience. It almost, I think, even watching it, starts to get uncomfortable. But where does that take you? And start, hopefully going from his journey to your journey.
Okay, so last question, and then we're
Sorry
going to go.
If that's too film.
No.
Theory,
it's just last question. But okay, why Wall? Why Bernstein's Wall?
Well, I really should at this point just say it's like the Rosebud or the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, and you can just come up with your own thing. It started as the Berlin Wall going up,
right,
and coming down, And just like if you remember the book Anonymous, the way they found out it was Joe Klein is they did this search of commonly used phrase in different writers' work. So he does talk a lot about bringing walls down. I think we have him twice saying it in the film. So it is supposed to be about bringing walls down in between people, but also his duality with his relationships with men and being married and composer versus conductor, and how he's fiercely patriotic because of his father's immigrant story, but he's quoting Wendell Willkie, One World. He is so proud of being Jewish, but he had a Christmas special. I mean, he's talks very. He talks about Jesus in a way where he's like, we can borrow, the part of that is he believes in that too. Just like he says, I believe in everything. So it's really him getting over his own walls, but it started with this. And if you don't like that, go for that Pulp Fiction briefcase.
No, I like that. And also it has the Wailing Wall in the middle of it. So, we got
it does. The Judaism is a big part of the film.
Of course.
Especially because of the philosophical and ethical part, not just the more cultural part, and that's I hope people see that in the film. I mean, he's giving a prayer on Rosh Hashanah to you can imagine what that audience is in 1961.
I know. So a very complicated man, but a fascinating man, and a fascinating film, a way of putting it together. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you.